Hello, Richard here from Eagle 6 Airsoft, and I am going to be doing a video of this ARES, the Amoeba. This is the slightly longer variant that they do, you know, of the sort of honey badger style. So obviously it's got the PDW type stock on the back there, but instead of having the standard you know, honey badger front end on the front there, it's got a slightly different longer front end. So this is chosen by the customer for a DMR build. We're getting a lot of customers coming in, popping in for DMR builds. So it's interesting and thought-provoking, this potential build. Not that the customer probably cares, but just generally interesting. Obviously we get people popping in for you know, DMR builds, you know, saying I want a DMR off the wall. I'm like, well, you know, a DMR is built, you know, in Airsoft. So we obviously a DMR being you know, something that's maybe single shot, that's firing at a higher FPS as governed by each individual site. Then the customer brings those specifications to you, and then you build the DMR to it. So when people are popping in saying, you got any DMRs on the shelf, you know, so that's you know, well, there's very few, you know, guns that are specifically set to UK DMR limits that would be off the shelf. So are they referring to you know, guns that have a, you know, a DMR look to them, you know? And obviously if they are referring to a gun that has a DMR look to them, because I had customers come in saying that they've got a DMR and they've bought a DMR, and I'm saying, well, how high is that FPS? Well, it's 350. And I'm like, well, it's not a DMR, is it? So you know, so it becomes a bit weird in that we're sort of always a little bit up against this in terms of people's experiences and knowledge, you know, in Airsoft, and obviously when they want these custom things, and I suppose in some ways retail just trade on that a little bit, you know, in selling buy this gun, it's a DMR, and yet it's 350 FPS by that company, you know. So it's which is an odd one, but it just has a scope on and is a slightly longer gun. You know, in Airsoft, obviously the range and accuracy is determined by the amount of lift that's applied to the object. Yeah, so obviously if you remove all the hop from an Airsoft gun and then you fire, it will go, no matter what that power, you know, it will go out of the gun and it will travel about 20-30 meters and then just drop down. So that is that, you know, even 1,000 FPS, you know, behind that gun, and it's still going to travel 30 or 40 meters and then go down. Yeah, so it will never travel the distance that people are hoping without a hop unit. So the majority of obviously range and accuracy obviously comes from the hop unit, if you know what I mean. So on Airsoft guns, they effectively float, you know, like a golf ball, BBs for a long distance. So it's backspin, which creates I think it's low pressure on one side, high pressure on the other, like a plane, and then creates this lift effect, and that's what creates what we call carry. And I use the word carry because it's the same as golf, you know. It's this backspin applies to it, and it promotes different pressure on one side than another, and then it basically creates lift, and golf balls carry for a certain distance, and when that backspin runs out, it effectively drops out of the sky just like an aeroplane does, you know. So the lift comes from removes from an aeroplane, and obviously depending on the weight of that aeroplane, obviously it will drop out of the sky. It won't carry for a certain distance, you know, so and glide, if you know what I mean, like people think, if you know what I mean. It will just fall out of the sky, you know, like a heavy object, if you know what I mean. So and that's why obviously a lot of people get in issues with Airsoft with regards to firing at somebody. And obviously I've definitely hit that guy, and obviously the marshal stood next to him and watching them all go by his feet, and you know, because obviously they look immediately like I think that I hit the golf ball and it lands on the green. I'm like, I'm definitely on the green. It is on the green. You walk down there and it is 40 meters short of the green, or 40 yards I suppose in golf. So yeah, it's a big issue with obviously things. And separately of all of that, again, why this one's so interesting, because there's so many aspects that hit on DMR builds. So this particular one, obviously a lovely new gun, and that's what the customer wanted in his specification. So I want something different. I want change up from my previous DMR, but obviously he's spent a lot of money on his previous DMR, so we would like obviously that parts moving across and putting into that you know, DMR. You know, into this one, but the problem is obviously we have this issue where obviously a lot of guns look like they're M4 shaped, externally, even to this point where I've seen you know, very prominent techs online, you know, going, you know, all the guns, you know, a TM spec, you know, so and all V2 spec, and all, you know, parts fit for one another because all guns are TM spec. Well, you know, ARES, you know, along with obviously all the other companies, you know, don't do, a lot of other companies don't do a TM spec gearbox shell, right? So obviously they do their own spec gearbox shell. You can't immediately put all parts from a TM straight into that ARES. It's now ARES spec, the same as G&G is G&G spec, and the same as you know, ICS is ICS spec, and to the degree now where you know, very much gone are the days where people would be copying, you know, so the Tokyo Marui standard, yeah, to the point now where some aftermarket parts are not even being made, you know, they say, oh, it's made to Tokyo Marui specs, you know, and it turns out when you actually ask the manufacturer, you know, their test gun was a SEMA. So hang on a minute. So if it, you know, that's not TM spec. Oh, but the SEMA is TM spec, isn't it? Well, what is it? You know, you know, I can take a measurement and then I can try and copy that on a CAD file. You know, I can then have that produced, you know, on a 3D printer, and I say, well, I measured it something similar to the TM spec. You know, I'd even argue in arrogance that I measured it very accurately. You know, but is it when it actually comes out from the manufacturer? And herein lies the problem with current airsoft tech, in that some parts just don't fit, you know, from other guns, and obviously just from the UK side of things with regards to I can't say for other countries and labour costs and stuff, but obviously in the UK it's getting quite expensive to own, you know, workshops in buildings, and obviously pay those rents and stuff, and obviously pay labour, and obviously with the minimum wage going up and stuff, and obviously, you know, gun techs wanting more than minimum wage, because I'd argue it's quite a difficult job, even though we keep using the word toys and try and you know, be negative, you know, especially in a lot of the forums and stuff where you go about where it's only toys, it's only this, it's only airsoft, it's just fun, you know, but technically someone somewhere is trying to make a living from actually working on these. And you know, I don't know about you, but I can go earn a lot more by taking a car engine apart, you know, so and getting paid for that. So obviously it's a weird state of affairs with regards to airsoft gun teching, in that obviously people don't want to pay for toys because they're obviously a toy. But we're doing technical work, which, you know, I'd argue we could go work on many other things and many other industries and be probably quite accomplished, you know, and arguably get paid more. So we're doing this obviously because we like it, we enjoy it, and we're hoping we help out. But obviously the particular scope, just to get back on point, was obviously two guns laid side by side. You know, can you take everything out of this gun and can you put it into this gun? And herein lies the problem, is technically just from as in you remove the home sort of ability for somebody to tech at home and that sort of aspect of things, and go to a gun tech. We now need to take up two portions of the gun bench, you know, so one for one gun, one for another, while we move one from another, one from another. If we don't do that, then obviously we're taking apart one to create a pile, to then obviously create another box, to then obviously move parts from that next gun into a box, to then obviously, you know, move the parts back across to put them back into the other gun, and it just becomes this whole sort of thing where to the point where obviously, you know, I mean, I can do research on an ARES, you know, I've technically worked on a few ARES before. I wouldn't like to say that I've got anywhere near the amount of ARES under my belt that other people have, if you know what I mean. So you know, also my TMs and stuff like that, which obviously why we try and focus on guns that you know a lot of, because you can obviously answer those technical questions immediately, as opposed to going in and researching and doing an investigation to find out what parts fit. Obviously on the ARES they use the EFCS MOSFET system, which is obviously one of these magnetically controlled Hall effect types. So I've actually found it quite enjoyable, obviously without knowing the long-term history, which obviously you can Google certain people's opinions on that, you know, on the internet, but I haven't obviously got the long-term history on this gun, because I haven't sent it out to my customer, and I haven't, you know, heard from him in 5 years time, which some of our TM guns are coming back, you know, after 12 years of use, you know, so we're getting this massive and we have this huge amazing history, you know, of obviously well, how long do these parts last, how long do they think. Obviously with this particular one we're not quite sure, so obviously and then obviously from a design perspective, obviously the gun tech has to now spec out a build. Obviously on this particular one, So we were obviously faced with moving all parts from one to another, because obviously the customer spent a lot of money on one gun, but obviously that gun's now to the point where he A, wants to replace it, and B, it's getting a bit problematic. Some guns just start to keep causing problems, like some cars just like to keep causing problems, and it gets to the point where just things start to get untenable, and you're like, do you know what, maybe the grass is greener somewhere else. We're going to go get a new gun and obviously have a nice new experience, if you know what I mean. And I preferred in this particular one, just from a design perspective and obviously based upon time, to focus just on that new gun. Okay, so let's get the new gun apart. Let's design the package from the ground up, you know. So with this new gun, which is obviously going to be a DMR spec, you know, so obviously the first thing with a DMR is ammo. Obviously we want the gun to be the most accurate possible, which means the most accurate and heavy ammo that we can possibly get, you know. So that is the best place to start with a DMR. There's absolutely no point, and snipers don't do it, so why should DMR people do it? And I argue, why should AEG people do it either? Why would you build a DMR or a sniper and then run .2s? You know what I mean? It's the least accurate ammo. It's like you just wouldn't. Yeah, so I have customers that have, but you know, I wouldn't. Yeah, and I wouldn't recommend it. So obviously we're starting with the 4.3s. So obviously, how does the actual you know, ARES handle those 4.3s? Well, obviously initially when we first tested it, it was struggling to lift those, and obviously we had you know, obviously towards max hop, and we also had a very low FPS, if you know what I mean, on those 4.3s. So obviously that's what happened when we tried to use this ammo. So immediately out of the box, we find that obviously the initial gun falls short of obviously that DMR spec. And this is where obviously upgrades come in to obviously do it, as opposed to just fitting upgrades, because, you know, upgrades, you know, obviously we're sort of approaching it from the point of view of, well, how do we turn this DMR into something that you know, is, while obviously not just putting parts in, because obviously the gun is working, you know. Now we don't know how well it's working, because obviously we don't have that history on it. We could make the assumption that obviously all gears in every single gun are rubbish, and let's put obviously the super expensive gears in here, but we're going down a sensible route of like, well, we don't know, there could be fantastic gears, you know. So let's try these and see how we get on, you know, inside there. It could be a fantastic cylinder, it could be fantastic piston head, could be fantastic piston, you know, until you just have done 100 of them, and over the period of years, you know, and even then I could say that you could start to possibly find yourself down a slippery slope where and like I say, once you get dialed in on a package, you could just start offering that package as default, you know, where actually technically you're taking out some good bits. But from the initial part, when the first build package is ever done for any gun, you know, you're meant to obviously, you know, start up, you know, piece by piece, and change things obviously as and when they need it. So obviously this particular one, we have you know, obviously we had a working gun, which was lifting those heavy ammos, you know, okay, but not as good as it could be. So obviously we've put in a new hop rubber. So on this particular one, we've gone for an R hop on the original barrel. We have installed a because obviously it's going to be DMR, so we're probably going to want that instantaneous trigger response. So we've gone for a which is a bit of a risk, because we hadn't had that knowledge until we actually done the physical work on it. But we thought, well, what just from a design perspective, why don't we pair you know, one of these new brushless motors with obviously the faster trigger response with the actual MOSFET that comes with it, because obviously when we went in, we realized that the gate from one would not move over into the ARES, because obviously it won't accept a gate MOSFET, if you know what I mean. So in that particular gearbox, so we thought, well, what is a gate? Obviously, what is a MOSFET obviously trying to do? It's obviously trying to save the trigger contacts. It's trying to give you a 20% boost in overall performance on average. You know, so which obviously that MOSFET that comes with it does technically offer, you know, so which is obviously the main features of having a MOSFET in there. Obviously there's other ones that one MOSFET might be longer lasting than another, and one might come with Bluetooth, whereas another one doesn't. But at its core, a MOSFET is just meant to save trigger contacts and give you fast trigger response, which the original ARES MOSFET technically does. So we built you know, around the ARES original MOSFET until proven otherwise through obviously longevity. You know, obviously if customers, for instance, the G&G MOSFETs, I actually quite like them, you know, but people do break the triggers contacts on them, and then it does become a bit of a false economy when it's relatively easy on a G&G to obviously put an aftermarket MOSFET system system in there. This particular one, obviously, we may need to go down, obviously, the route of if there's no other product at that particular time, or other ones that we've researched that fit, in actually repairing that MOSFET or replacing it with the like for like. But we will cross that bridge if and when that ever happens. You know, for now, obviously, it's a perfectly good MOSFET. The gun seemed, you know, reasonably solid inside in terms of the parts, if you know what I mean. Obviously none of them are CNC machined and all that business, you know, so they're all cast, you know, products and stuff, and they could bring their own sort of set of things, but at the moment it's working absolutely fine. So and obviously it's not going to be running on a high rate of fire build, it's going to be running on single shots. We bought the programming module, thanks to the customer for letting me know that there's a programming module available for this particular one. So we bought the programming module, we programmed it to single shots. I was actually 3D printing a physical mod to go inside there, just to lock it to that, and the customer said, you know, just put the program module on there. I was like, all right, is there one? Right, okay, so we found that, we brought that in, and yes, it was incredibly simple to program it to a single shot, which has obviously resolved that particular issue. Obviously we're going to be running on a 11 volt on the battery, because obviously we want that fast trigger response for obviously DMR users. Obviously it's got a brushless motor in there for obviously that fast trigger response. Also brushless motors have no maintenance over time, so obviously we should have that nice you know, less, you know, maintenance going on there with the brushless motor. Obviously we've got a stronger spring in there to get to the FPS for the customer. We're running at about 286 FPS, which is about 1.64 joules of energy, with the customer's limit being 420 on a 0.2, which is 1.64 joules of energy. So we're running about the same energy as obviously 420 FPS site limit. So you should have no issues there, because that's obviously what was requested FPS wise. Obviously there is, let us know, but you know, and it's obviously a quick change spring on this particular jobby, so it's relatively fast to go up and down if you do want to. Another advantage of this, obviously overall it's an all polymer construction gun. I think it's solid. You know, obviously there are advantages of being nice and light, and that's quite nice for obviously nipping around as a DMR user. So yeah, so obviously we're just going to test it now, which I'm suddenly realizing, apologies, that I actually just left the mag inside. That's amateurish of me. I'll be back in a second. That'll be nice when we get the indoor range, won't it? So yeah, so to cut a long story short, if you know what I mean, to bore people for 15 minutes when all the customer wanted to do was obviously see his gun tested. You know, yeah, it's a complicated thing with obviously the gun, you know, building of obviously these DMRs, and also sort of not, you know, the last one which we built had a lot more internals done, because I believe we had some broken gears, and longevity proved that we needed it. This particular one obviously at the moment is working absolutely fine. Obviously just from a gun tech perspective, technically we should only be upgrading parts for the most part when we absolutely know that obviously they break. But it's difficult because obviously some guns, you know, you have that history over time where you know, people are just sort of, well, I know that they can break, you know, so should I then spend the parts to obviously upgrade them, you know, to anticipate that potential breakage. There's no right or wrong answer, unfortunately. Obviously people can have their opinions. Obviously I'll try to do what's best for obviously the customer in terms of costs, you know, keep things down when we don't need to needlessly escalate them. On the other hand, upgrading is fun, you know, sometimes. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure if it's fun all the time for me, so obviously doing it as a job, but in theory it should be fun. It should be something that people enjoy. So obviously if people do want to upgrade for enjoyment purposes, absolutely, you know, so why not treat it as a hobby and just upgrade, you know. Obviously we can't all go out there and say somebody should or shouldn't spend £5,000 on night vision, you know what I mean. It's nobody's place to dictate in these hobbies if you know what people should or shouldn't do. But like I say, I think this is a nice, sensible, conservative build. It didn't need a huge amount, if you know what I mean, in order to make it in air quotes good, you know, and you know, I think that it's a solid gun. So you know, obviously it may get, you know, some reviews or panned or something, but you know, I think it's actually really good. You know, and I can demonstrate it working now obviously on the DMR. This thing will be shooting 70 meters person size groupings, which is obviously what people are looking for obviously with the DMR. You know, it's obviously a nice looking gun, nice and light, and you know, yeah, I hope the customer enjoys it. So but I'll demonstrate it working. So yeah, so that's it. It's nice and simple, and I know I've bored you with a load of crap, but maybe somebody out there finds it interesting. And obviously I hope the customer enjoys the gun. It's, yeah, that's probably obviously why we took the direction that we did on this particular one. Obviously a lovely new gun, a few upgrades, all shiny new parts, as opposed to obviously taking older parts out of a gun that may or may not be compatible, on the off chance that they do or don't fit with a guaranteed labor charge. Yeah, so whereas this way we've got less of a labor charge, obviously shiny new parts in there. We kept it obviously simple, you know, only changing what's necessary, because we just don't know if the parts in here will last absolutely forever, you know, until we get that history, and even then obviously until you get 100 guns, you know, of the same thing, you just don't know what's edge case and what's not, if you know what I mean. You know, statistics, you know, it's a whole thing. So yeah, so I hopefully obviously we've done a nice sensible conservative build. I put all the parts in there. Obviously if somebody else has this gun or wants to do something similar, obviously the details are there. But yeah, we hope you enjoy. Apologies to bore you, but sometimes you know, it's just nice to get some of this info out there, you know, and yeah, cool. Thank you very much.